Shalom Uvracha, and welcome to Yeshiva Shamayla, to the headline show. My name is Yehoshua Pfeffer. I'm filling in this week for Rav David, who's away for the vacation period. And this week on the headline show, we're going to be speaking about a topic which is probably, the most important. I mean, is there anything more important than life itself, than looking after our own lives, than avoiding and refraining from danger and from dangerous situations? But what is a halachic approach to taking risks, to doing things that have some element of danger involved? Every year, and I say this with the greatest sorrow and the greatest sadness, but every year we have these terrible psoros, these terrible news of yeshiva-lite, bachrim, avrechim, this year Rav David Traub, tremendous Talmid Chacham, as well as a young avrech now from Yerushalayim, and a bacher who was away out of the country, drowned, lost their lives in tragic circumstances. And the question is, what is the halachic approach to doing things that have some element? I mean, a person that's going to go mountain climbing or rock climbing, or even going to the beach, swimming, for example, in an undeclared area, somewhere where there's no lifeguard, somewhere where a person says, I'm a good swimmer, I can do it, I'm fine. Is it mutter to go swimming in such a place without a lifeguard, when generally regulations say that one shouldn't be doing this? But a person says, I'm a good swimmer, I rely on myself. To what degree do we have the discretion to do things that involve an element of risk, an element of danger? Obviously, the safest thing in the world is to stay at home, but nobody stays at home the whole day. We all do things that involve some element of risk. We drive a car, even though driving a car has an element of danger. People, chas v'shalom, have car accidents, and some of them are even lethal. So to what degree does a halacha obligate us? Does a halacha define clear parameters for refraining, for avoiding dangerous situations? We know there's a mitzvah, v'nishmatem ma'odis lenafshesechem. The Posek itself is speaking about something else, kilo re'isam kol tzmona, but the Gemara, brachas lamed beis, the Sar that told one of the Amoraim, he told him that he was davening and he didn't pay attention to him, and he says, you're over on what it says, v'nishmatem ma'od lenafshesechem, because you didn't pay attention, to it. Gemara brachas daf lamed beis, and Poskim bring, for example, the Shulchan Aruch Harav mentions, based on v'nishmatem lo'od lenafshesechem, that a person has to look after his body, he has to refrain from dangerous circumstances. The Rambam, as we know, the Rambam says that roi shi'eten liboi l'chol advarim she'efsher lehagia loy nezek bahem. A person needs to beware, he needs to take precautions against anything that can cause him danger, cause him damage. He says, "Va'over aleim chayv makas ma'odus midrabanon." The Lashon of Rambam and Sefer Chinuch also. So we know that there's an imperative to look after ourselves. The Torah tells us, "V'asisa ma'ika legagecho," make a fence around the rooftops that chas v'shalom nobody should fall off. Chazal make a range of takanos. Chazal make takanos about maim geluyim, because of the danger that a snake might put his poison into the water, and therefore we're not allowed to drink maim geluyim. There's takanos against eating meat and fish together because it was considered dangerous, and the Gemara says one shouldn't put coins into one's mouth because of a sakana, that perhaps the coin was touched by somebody who has tzaras or an infectious disease, and this could cause you to become ill. So Chazal are very clearly watching, careful, cautious for our health, and they make the kind of the stipler. It's brought down in one of the Sfarim that speaks about driving. I think it's a sefer called Me'ir Nesivim from of Tamir in Yerushalayim, brings from the stipler that the stipler said that had Chazal been around in our generation, the stipler is writing a number of decades ago, then they would have prohibited driving. I mean, we think driving is something which is taken for granted. Everyone drives. But driving, we know that there's no real way to avoid car accidents. Not everyone has accidents, but accidents happen the whole time. And Rahman al-Islam, some of them are dangerous, some of them are lethal. And, even though we try and we try to enhance road safety and to take all the necessary precautions and to make sure the roads are all fixed up. People make mistakes, and we know that driving involves some element of risk. Says the Steipler Chazal would have simply answered driving. But again, what's the gather? What is considered an activity that is dangerous enough to be something that is forbidden, or something which is not recommended, frowned upon, something that Chazal would have answered? Skydiving, skiing. There's so many activities that we take for granted. Some people are more cautious and they don't like to do these things. Some people are more adventurous and they like to do things that are more extreme. So it's a matter of disposition, of tendency. What does Halacha have to say? How do we characterize, how do we define what's Mut and what's Asur in this realm, in this field, and how do we really know about the kind of precautions that we need to take in order to avoid the terrible, terrible tragedies that we hear about basically every year? Rahman al-Islam, we should never hear more, but every year in the Benes Manim period, we hear tragedies sometimes because of the lack of precautions that people adopt. So in a minute we're going to start, and we'll have some Chashuv Tamid Chachamim to speak about the Gedarim, the parameters, and the halachic approach to these issues. Before we begin, let me present the riddles for this week. First riddle speaks about relates to the Posek of Leman Tiskor Es Yom Teischa Me'eretz Mitzrayim Kol Yemei Chayecha, Posek in Parshas Re'eh, which teaches us about the mitzvah of remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim. Leman Tiskor, the Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, that we have to do every day. And the Gemara Psachim, of Kufiyot Dayan with base, the Gemara tells us B'Shem Rabbi Yaakov that a person needs to recall Yetzias Mitzrayim in Kiddush Hayom. Tzarech Sheitzkot Yetzias Mitzrayim b'Kiddush Hayom. We learn it out from the man Tizkor Es Yom, the Gzera Shava from Zachor Es Yom HaShabbos L'Kodra. And says the Rashbam that we have to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim in Kiddush Hayom. Kiddush Hayom is both ala kois and it's both in Tefillah, because Kiddush Hayom is the bracha of Mekadesh HaShabbos. So we have that ala kois at home or in shul, and we have it in davening, in the bracha of Mekadesh HaShabbos. The question is, why, if so, do we not mention in the Tefillah Ma'ariv of Shabbos, we don't mention Yetzias Mitzrayim? Why are we not Mekayim, this seemingly open Gemara, open Halacha? It's brought also in Machzor Vitri, it's brought in Balei Tosfos. Why don't we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim in Tefillah Arvis? And we know also the Magen Avraham has this famous question that a person is Yotzei Min HaTorah Kiddush by davening Ma'ariv. How can he be Yotzei? He didn't mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's one question, one riddle. The second riddle is a different pasha in Parshas Re'eh. It says there's called Shlala Kabeit El Toich Rechava V'Sarafta Ba'esh Es Ha'ir. The din of Ir Nidachas, that the city has to be burned down. And the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Aleph, the Gemara says, B'Shem Rabbi Eliezer, that a city that has a mezuzah, Eina Nasis Ir Hanidachas. Why? Because the Posek says it's called Shlala Tikva Etzel Toich Ha'ir V'Sarafta Ba'esh, and the mezuzah were not allowed to burn. It says L'Sasum Kain La Hashem Elokeichem. So from here that you're not allowed to be Moichek Shem Hashem. And that's why an Ir Nidachas that has a mezuzah is not burnt down based on the mitzvahs of Torah. And the question is, why didn't we say here Asay Doicha Lo Asay? The principle Chol Torah is a mitzvahs Asay, is Doicha mitzvahs Lo Asay. Over here we have a mitzvahs Asay of V'Sarafta, to burn down the city, and this mitzvahs Asay should be Doicha the Lo Asay of Lo Sasam Ken Lashem Elokeichem. So the whole city should be burnt, even with a mezuzah, because of Asay Doicha Lo Asay. Those are the two riddles for this week, and now we'll get straight into this week's headline show, which, as I mentioned, will be discussing the parameters of danger, of getting into dangerous situations. To what degree do we have to avoid and refrain? We don't have to stay at home. What are we allowed to do, and what should we be refraining from doing? We're privileged to have on today's show Rabbi Yitzchok Basser. Rabbi Basser is a Posek on Bais HaVaad in Lakewood, and also a Halachic Rebbe and Posek of Yeshiva Shari Shmuel in Lakewood. So It's a privilege, and thank you very much for being with us today, Rav Basser. And perhaps just by way of introduction, could you please outline to us what's the nature of the Isser or the Chiyuv to refrain from endangering oneself, from doing something dangerous? Is it considered a Doraisa? Is it Darbanan? Is it a Minag Tov? How do the Posek relate to the gravity, to the seriousness of the issue of refraining, of avoiding dangerous situations?
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Yeshua. Thank you for having me on. So just to address your question, the Posek discuss this at length, whether what the prohibition of putting yourself in sakana is. The Rambam discusses it, the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rambam brings down that he applies the Posek that we read in last week's parsha of Hishamar L'cha Shmar Nafshecha Ma'id, and he says that applies as a mitzvah to say to be careful, not that a person should not put himself in sakana. Now, I just wanted to point out that actually the pashtus of the Posek, the simple reading of the Posek, when you read that Posek in Parshas Vaschanan, it would seem that the Posek is discussing the Isra of Shikchas HaTorah, because the Torah really continues.
Pentishkach Esadvarim.
Pentishkach Esadvarim, right, correct. So, however, really the Rambam applies this to taking care of yourself actually comes from a Gemara. Now, it's interesting, if you look in the Gemara, the Gemara is not quoting a Tana or an Amira. The Gemara is actually quoting a Roman officer who quoted this. The Gemara relates a story that a Roman officer saw a certain Tana davening, and the Tana was engrossed in his Tana.
It says Chassid Echad. We don't even know who it is. The Chassid Echad was davening. Right,
the Chassid was davening, and he said, Reika, you empty person, your Torah says that Hishamar Nafshecha. So apparently he understood that it applies to taking care of yourself. Now, I assume that we're not passing from a Roman officer, but rather from the fact that the Gemara quotes this officer. Obviously, the Gemara, if the officer was off target and just missed up the Posek, the Gemara would not be quoting it. It's not relevant for us to know what this the officer's actual nusach is if he was totally off. So obviously, it would seem that the Posek understood that from the fact that Torah expresses the Isra of Shikchas HaTorah in terms of the importance to take care of your nefesh, we see the Torah is viewing as an imperative that a person has to take care of the nefesh and always, and therefore, like the Rambam says, it will be a mitzvah to say to refrain from doing anything that's dangerous. Now, just as far as whether this is D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan, if you look at this Rambam is in Hilchas Reitzeach or Shmiras HaNefesh. If you look in the Rambam, the next halacha, the Rambam says that there are several things that Chazal astered because of Sakanas Nefashis, and therefore someone who disregards Chazal and engages in those things, we makanei say makas mardis. So the first halacha the Rambam seems to say it's a mitzvah to say. The second halacha he seems to say makas mardis, which we know applies to Chachamim, and he really says that Chachamim asked certain things. So there's three approaches in the Poskim how to resolve these what seeming contradiction in the Rambam. One approach is that the first Rambam where he says this approach is the Levush in Yerdei brings down such an approach that really the whole thing is the Rabbanon. This he says to say he just means it's an Smachta Ba'alma, and really taking care of yourself is just an Isser D'Rabbanan. And the reason why it's Rabbanan is because the Torah is really talking about the Isra of Shikchas HaTorah. That's one approach. Just the only one I'm aware of saying that is Levush in Yeridea. The many more Achronim, the Hashochan learns like this. They learn that really everything is D'Oraisa, and this that he says Makas Mardis is because there's no real Malchus on this mitzvah to say, so you give him Makas Mardis. But there's a third approach, which really the later place, I'd say the greatest number of Achronim that I saw really go with this, and including Rav Moshe Feinstein and the Rav Moshe, they understand, they draw a distinction between whether there's a clear and present danger, and in that case it would be an Issa D'Oraisa, whereas Chazal astered even things that are very davar rachak that should be dangerous. In that case, it would only be D'Rabbanan and Makanei Soy Makas Mardis. And that's really, like you say, the a large number of Achronim go like that, the shailoswith, the Avnei Tzedek, the Shem Aryeh, many Achronim go like this, and like we said, the Moshe Feinstein goes like this, and this is Pashtus in Halacha, that only something that's a clear and present danger is D'Oraisa, and something that's not a clear and present danger is only D'Rabbanan.
It's interesting that even though this is very much not Pshutei Shel Mikra, nevertheless many poskim treat it as a D'Oraisa. It just shows how the poskim treated this in a very serious way, in a very grave way, meaning they took this pasuk, which is, mentioned in the Gemara, in the story about a sar, this is not your classic, D'Oraisa kind of material, and to get an Issa D'Oraisa, again, and the Rambam in Hilchos Deos also, I think Perek Dalet Hilchos Deos, the Rambam mentioned there like a recommendation, to do things that are, to refrain from things that damage your house and so on. The fact that poskim treat this as a D'Oraisa shows you, I think, how seriously they took it, meaning, to give it a level of a D'Oraisa.
Well, I think that's just how they learned the Gemara. I mean, really, like we said, it comes from
the Gemara in Lamed Beis. It's difficult to see a D'Oraisa from there. It's like maximum, a shtickle, remez,
That's correct, but the Gemara, like we're saying, the Gemara would not quote it if it was irrelevant. It was just...
it's relevant as a remez, as a drus, but as a D'Oraisa, that's generally, the Rambam, for example, in the Minyan Mitzvahs, only something which is Furish Posek is D'Oraisa. I'm just saying it's an extreme kind of example where you have a D'Oraisa, even though in the Posek it's very much bederech remez or not the Pshutei Shel Mikra.
Okay, and now there's two more points I wanted to make, and that is about Sakana, which really goes along the lines that you're saying about the seriousness that Chazal took this. We find two things that we find about this Isser over other Yisum. One is the Taisim discuss a concept of Chamira Sakanta Meisura. That means that there are certain chashashes that Minatayra, if it was a matter of something being mutter or aser, we would say that you don't have to chayshish that it's aser. However, since of the extreme care that the Torah says Shmar ma'oid l'nafshei seichem, we aser it. But if it's a sakanas nefashis, for example, there's a Pri Megadim that says that when we have a concept of cheskas heter. Something we know at one point in time was mutter, and we have a suffix, that maybe something happened to it, and now it's aser, became aser. We would apply the chazaka to be matter it. However, with something that's a chash sakana, we don't apply that. And for example, let's say you have a bowl of water that you have maybe a snake came in the past few minutes and drank from it. We're still going to answer it because of this extreme severity which Chazal related to sakana. And in fact, Yimganim even goes so far as to say that maybe he's not sure if a sekseka would be matter a chashash sakana. I mean, there are Paiskim that hold that even though we hold Roiv is not Maitzimamin, there are some Paiskim that hold that sekseka is Maitzimamin. Afal Pikein, we see that sakana, they're not matter it.
Right.
That's one point. Another point is that the Gemara also brings down that besides the Isser, the Gemara says that it's maskir. If someone does place himself in sakana, so maskir and le'avainoisav, it causes that the Rebbeinu Shalom looks down upon the person, and it examines whether he's right to be saved. And it says if they do save him, the menaken le'im yischiyoisav. You could have some devil who thinks, okay, I'll take my chances, and at the end he says, oh, you see, it worked. But what he doesn't know is that he just wiped out some of the mitzvahs. So it's really something that Chazal, obviously the Rebbeinu Shalom expects the person to act responsibly. That's part of what the Rebbeinu Shalom expects the person to take care of himself, and that's the way the Rebbeinu Shalom relates to us. He wants us to take care of ourselves.
Right. So I think that's a very good introduction. We've established that the general way that poskim relate to sakana and the suffix sakana, which is, again, it's a bit of a delicate terminology. What's sakana, what's suffix sakana, because every suffix sakana is also sakana, but poskim relate to inyanim of danger in a very severe way. Let's just quickly, if you can give us a summary, when is it mutter to place yourself in a situation that involves a sakana, something that would usually be forbidden? What are the kind of reasons, the kind of rationales or situations, circumstances where Chazal say, in this case it's mutter. In this case you don't have to be worried. You can place yourself in a situation that would otherwise be considered a dangerous situation that you're not allowed to place yourself in, but here it's mutter. Well, what kind of examples are there of that?
That's a good question. We find Be'ikr two examples that Chazal permit, where the place can permit someone to place themselves in sakana. The first one is there's a concept that brought down the Gemara and the Posek called Dashu Bei Rabim. That means there's a concept when you have a small measure of sakana. The Achiezer says about it that it has to be a sakana she'einoi matzli, something that's a very marginal sakana. However, most of society are willing to undertake that sakana. So then there's a concept the Posek call Shemer B'Tzayim Hashem, that Hashem watches fools. In other words, the foolish people, Hashem is willing to watch over social folly and watch people that engage in normative things that have some element of danger, but not particularly dangerous. Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe in Chayshim Mishpat discusses this, and he's talking about someone who wants to eat unhealthy foods, fatty meats and sharp foods, things that could make a person ill. And Rav Moshe brings down that this is mutter since most people do it. And actually, Rav Moshe brings down a fascinating raya. He says if you look at the Rambam that you actually mentioned earlier about in Hilchos Deis, the Rambam says that a person is responsible to keep his guf healthy, and it's impossible to serve Hashem properly unless you're healthy. But nowhere in this Rambam, and then he goes on to say about various how he prescribes how a person should be eating and taking care of himself. But Rav Moshe points out nowhere in that parak in Hilchos Deis does the Rambam mention a trace that there should be some sort of isser to eat unhealthy foods, even though it's possible that unhealthy foods can make a person sick. So Rav Moshe proves that since in the broader society not everyone is going to do these things, and people deem that it's worth worth a hana to engage in these activities. Therefore, strictly speaking, it's not. There would be a concept of Hashem B'Tzayim Hashem, and a person does not al pi din have to follow the Rambam's prescription of healthy eating. Although he says it's certainly a worthwhile thing.
Recommend. So for example, I mean, what kind of activities would fall under that category? I mean, driving, I assume, is Dasha Bei Rabim. Skiing is Dasha Bei Rabim.
You mentioned, it's interesting. You mentioned driving. I mean, there is another concept, which is the driving. The risk posed by driving is extremely nominal. I mean, we're talking about like maybe 1/2 for every 100,000, either I believe 100 million, a million miles driven, which is what it would take like an average person thousands of years to drive that amount. We're talking a very, very nominal risk. I'm not even sure that Halacha addresses such a nominal risk. I mean, everything a person does, there is some risk. I mean, food could be poisoned. A person could get hit by lightning. The question is, there are some risks that are so nominal.
Okay, so let's say skydiving, skiing, parachuting, things that...
These are good examples of things that our normative society does engage in. People enjoy the thrill. And strictly speaking, in Halacha, it would be mutter, although probably you would have this Rambam that says a person should take care of themselves. I'm not sure the Rambam would not apply to these dangerous activities. And the Rambam, like Rav Moshe learns, is talking over the Isser of in addition to this, of if someone wants to go skydiving, I don't think we can tell them that al pi din it's usher because of the sakana, based on this reasoning of Moshe Feinstein, that anything any activity that.
Right, but would you say the same about texting while you drive? I mean, please, listeners, do not text while you drive. But I'm asking Rabbi Basser, what would you say about that? I mean, again, it's something that a lot of people do. I think they're wrong. And when I have a taxi driver that's texting when he's driving, I tell him to stop, politely, of course. What would you say about that?
Right, that I'm not at all sure would be mutter, because really it's something that all society also recognizes is a dangerous activity, and these days I think almost everywhere society itself forbids it. Everyone understands it's dangerous. The reason why people do it is not because they view the tremendous benefit of sending a text this moment. So I really don't know that we could really apply Rav Moshe's reasoning to texting while driving, because, like I'm saying, Rav Moshe's talking about where society makes a risk versus benefit calculation. I don't think that happens, and as you see that society is really ganging up against such people, and every now and then they have these programs to try and stop people and catch people, and I'm not at all sure Rav Moshe would apply to that, to texting while driving.
See, you would say that al pi halacha, texting while driving would be a problem, meaning it would be awesome.
Questionable. I would say questionable. I'm unsure of whether it would actually.
I think it's good. Let's make it. Let's declare an issur on texting while driving.
Right. So I'm saying all I can say is it's questionable. I really can't say on that, because you could make the argument the other way, like you were starting to make, that people actually do it, and even though society against it. So I'm really I'd say it's a questionable activity.
And for example, and I'm sorry to bring up a different example, but it's interesting, and these are so relevant now in the Bais HaVaad period, where you have, to our great distress and sorrow, every year we have, tragedies in the Bais HaVaad period, and some of them are unfortunately caused by people who go swimming in unmarked beaches without a lifeguard, and they say, I'll be okay.
Right, I would say that's, again, something that society deems as very dangerous. Almost every beach has the sign, do not go swimming. And the fact that some people are foolhardy enough to do it, I don't know that they're making a risk versus benefit calculation. They're just not thinking. They're just, I don't think that you could say that normative society engages in this, when really normative society has campaigns against it and has signs against it, and is really fighting such dangerous activities.
Right. We have campaigns and signs against fatty foods, and people,
Well,
carry on eating.
I think there's a difference in the level of fatty foods. You'll have articles in science.
Right.
At least not yet. Wait till
right. I don't want to get into smoking too much, but there's endless campaigns against smoking, and still people smoke. But yeah, I definitely understand the distinction. Let us take a step back a minute. Do Chazal or the Posek give us parameters to decide what kind of activity is considered sakana in the first place? Is flying in an airplane a sakana? If you said driving is safe, going on an airplane is even safer than driving. What's considered in terms of statistics? How would we define an activity that involves sakana? That, like you said before, some things you don't need dasha be'rabim. This is not called sakana. How would we define that? What are the parameters?
That's an excellent question, and really it's relevant to taking halacha mice out of issur of sakana. There's a tshuva from Rabbi Shlomo Zalman in the Mechaber. He addresses this. He says we actually don't find a clear shear of how much sakana is called sakana. However, he says in a svara, he would say that anything that society, Rov Bnei Adam, are concerned about, that's called a sakana. And it's us, the person is not allowed to put themselves into such a sakana. And he says you're even allowed to Mechal Shabbos to get someone out of such a sakana. However, something that most people are not afraid of, and so even if there's some level of risk, however, this is where we say that Shem B'Tzayim Hashem, and a person is allowed to rely on what society does, and that people are not faced. He brings an interesting example, a very fascinating example. He's talking about smallpox vaccination. He said most people would consider it a sakana to go around unvaccinated from smallpox. Subsequently, it was eradicated, but in his days there was there was fear of catching smallpox. And he says most people would view it as, when the doctor says, okay, it's time for your smallpox shot, they would view it as an imperative to get a shot. However, let's say he's talking about a case, let's say the time that the person is due for their smallpox is on Shabbos, right? So are you allowed to take a shot on Shabbos? So he says that certainly is not called a sakana, because most people, even though in general they would like to get a shot to protect themselves, and they view being unvaccinated as a sakana, however, just to wait a day or two, that's not such a sakana. But then he goes on to say a fascinating thing. Let's say a person gets it, either you could get it on Shabbos, or you're going to get it 4 or 5 years later. Let's say he's living on some remote island. He actually entertains it side. He says such a thing people would be scared to do. Now, the person's willing to take a risk of a day or two, or maybe even a week, but to take it for 4 or 5 years, the sakana of being unvaccinated against smallpox, he actually entertains it side that maybe a person can Mechal Shabbos, because since most of society views that as a sakana, that itself would determine that that's called a sakana.
That's fascinating. It's relative, meaning it depends on, let's say, a different place or a different time. When attitudes change, then the halacha will also change concerning whether we consider it a sakana or not. It's not something which is substantive. Is it, what percentage chance, how many people actually die from this, Rahman al-Islam, but it's rather the question of how society views it.
Right, that's a good point. And really, Moshe Feinstein takes this even a step further, really based in line with what you're saying. Rabbi Moshe actually brings a fascinating raya from a very difficult Magen Avram. There's a Magen Avram that says that if a person puts himself into sakana, let's say he goes into midbar when he's not supposed to, Pshia, on Shabbos, it's needed to see this to not to be Mechal Shabbos, even to save himself. Now, on the surface, it's impossible to understand the Magen Avram. I mean, how could it possibly be such a thing? I mean, it's an Isser D'Oraisa to not take care of yourself and not take yourself as sakana. How could you, for a kapara, how could you possibly be over an Isser D'Oraisa like Michal Achal Shum that he put himself wrongly into sakana?
Two wrongs don't make it right. If you did something wrong, so get yourself out of it.
Right. So Rav Moshe has a very fascinating approach, which you'll see really comes out a lot of Halacha Ma'aseh, and that is, he says like this: there's a spectrum of people's das. Like you have some people that are more timid and scared easier, and some people are more courageous and scared of less. So that's like a healthy spectrum. We're talking about only, of course, sane people. Of course, there's daredevils who do all kinds of things. But he's talking within normal society, there's a spectrum of what people consider dangerous. Rav Moshe says that let's say you have a timid person, and he's scared, and then a timid person within the spectrum of timidness, and he's scared of such a thing, he'd be allowed to Mechal Shabbos to protect himself from that thing. But let's say a courageous person would not be scared, he has no chiyuv to be Mechal Shabbos, he can even put himself in such a sakana, because for him, it's not a danger. He rightly doesn't, he's not scared of it. So Rav Moshe says what the Magen Avram means is that if you have a timid person who and he has to face a situation that a courageous person would not be scared of the situation, but he is. So he said even though he's allowed to be Mechal Shabbos because he is scared, he's allowed to adopt the mindset of a courageous person and not be Mechal Shabbos, and that's what the Magen Avram is talking about. So it really is a fascinating.
I mean, the fact that it again, because of my relative timidness, because I'm a timid person and I perceive this as a sakana, then I would be able to rely on my own intuitions, even though I know that other people have persuaded me on an intellectual level, but emotionally,
we're talking about on an intellectual level. There is a real sakana. We're not talking about someone who's just scared and not looking correctly. There is a level of concern here. We're talking in a case where there's a real level of concern. The person may.
Well, it's a gray area. Right, it's like a borderline.
Right. Now the level of chances are a certain level that some people, if you tell them there's a 0.02%, they'll say I'm all in, and some people say 0.02, I'm very scared. So now the reasonable people will have a different reaction, different reasonable reaction.
Right. Well,
the same information.
This will be very again for parents and children, because the parents are usually very afraid. Don't go to the beach, don't go rock climbing, don't climb Everest, and the kid will say, hey, come on, mom, come on, dad, it's not such a big deal.
Right, but it has to be mature understanding that it is safe. We don't go with Ketanim and Ketani Adas. And as a person is...
Yeah, but, there are a lot of things which, you could say, you could look at it one way, you could look at it the other way.
Right.
So according to this Rav Moshe, it would actually make a difference of how your own personal perspective, not just society's perspective, but even your own personal perspective.
Right. Although I'll tell you a fascinating case that's relevant that comes out of Rav Moshe. Let's say a person's hiking with a group of, either Bachrim or something, and the group would like to do something that he sees as some danger to, and he's by nature a timid person. So the question, but he's under peer pressure to do it along with the group. The question is he allowed to ignore his own feelings of timidness and do what the group does? So according to Rav Moshe, he would have to take a step back and think that if a courageous person, if there's a spectrum of society that really engages in this activity, so even though I'm scared, I'm still allowed to do what they're doing because it's not strictly speaking usher, because there is a large amount of society that does it. So if he's under peer pressure to do it and he would like to give in to the peer pressure and ignore his own feelings, that's okay. Now, of course, the person has to be careful. Sometimes if he has an inner voice telling him, this is dangerous, Lav Davka, the roiv of society, would do what his friends, his esteemed teenage friends would do, and then he would not be allowed to do it. And if he's not sure, we say, like we said initially, we said, if he's not sure that it's actually safe, then it would be usher. But if it's something that he knows that people engage in, just he's afraid and his friends want to do it, he would be allowed to overlook his own feelings and engage in such activity. That's really what should come out from Rav Moshe Feinstein.
Right. Although it's interesting because if he doesn't overlook his own feelings, he would be able to be mechalal Shabbos to get himself out of that situation. So it's chutta saira. I mean, this is very, very delicate stuff. It's on the one hand to be mechalal Shabbos to get yourself out of it, and on the other hand, you can just go ahead and put yourself into it if you overlook that inner calling.
Right, that is correct. That is what comes out of Moshe's fascinating facts based on learning this Magen Ram.
Right. So you would say then you would say then that there are some parts of the world where things are looked upon as being secure and safe, and everything depends on standards. Let's say in the Western world, we generally have very high standards of security and safety and precautions and so on. People drive in a much more safe way. You come to sometimes drivers come to Israel, or certainly if they go to other Eastern countries, and they feel very unsafe in the way people even drive. And you would say that the standards of the halachic standards would change based on where you are and based on what the social norm is. Is that accepted among poskim, or do some poskim say no? There's something absolute. There's a standard of putting yourself in a situation of danger, percentages, statistics. How do we look at it?
Well, I mean, realistically, you can't really give a share with percentages and statistics. Who's going to know what statistic? Like, you walk out of your house, and what's your chances of? I mean, we could do in.
You're saying there's no mere tamatzoi for Sakana.
Well, in other words, if you constantly hear that people who engage in this activity are getting killed, then that's a present danger. I don't think anyone would be mad for such a thing. Mm-hmm. But for things that are just risks that everyone does, and every now and then there's a casualty. That's really what the person was saying. It really depends on the way society looks. And you're correct, absolutely correct, that it changes based on the locale.
Based on the society.
Third world countries. I mean, if you were born in a third world country and you wanted to apply American standards, you couldn't do anything.
Right, you wouldn't be able to leave the house. Now, just to finish off, and I assume this is obvious, but let's just emphasize it to finish. When there's a law in a country, and there's a Dina D'Malchua, let's say in states where you have laws on seatbelts or on wearing a helmet when you're riding a motorbike or something like that, then it's obvious that Dina D'Malchua applies for something which is L'tikun Bnei HaMedina. That we would assume is there's no discretion for a person to take the law into his hands. We're speaking about things that there's no specific law of Dina D'Malchua about, but when there's a specific law, then that would be binding. Rasset, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll just finish off that certainly poskim say that even in Eretz Yisrael, poskim say where there's a machlokes about whether there's Dina D'Malchua or not, that's concerning things like taxes and other things that are related to the Malchus. But where it's for Tikkun B'nai Medina, I think Chasam Sofer says that certainly Dina D'Malchua would apply, and therefore if it's in Eretz Yisrael, for example, the police take very seriously the matter of seatbelts and texting and everything else. So certainly those would apply, and in Mitzvah Hashem we should all make sure that we stay safe and we avoid any dangers. And again, thank you very much to Rabbi Basser for joining us. So with us on the line now is Rabbi Yaakov Rappaport. Rabbi Rappaport is also an attorney specializing in traffic accidents, among other issues of personal injury. And Rabbi Yaakov, thank you very much for being with us on the line. And perhaps as a good kind of opening discussion, take us through what you would think is the basic sugya that relates to questions of going on outings, going on trips, going on vacations. Obviously, at this time of year, the vacation time, Ben Ismanim time, many people plan different types of trips, different types of vacations. Bachar will go on hikes and on different tiolim. And obviously, some of these involve some element of danger, meaning you're safer staying at home than going on some hike or a trek in some challenging terrain. Some people will want to do sports that people would consider extreme sports and things like that. How would you delineate or define the halachic approach to going out and doing these kind of things, which involve, again, they're not, we wouldn't consider them life-threatening necessarily, but they involve some element of danger beyond staying at home. How would the halacha relate and approach to such venture, to such ideas?
So I'd like to open up with a question which is asked by a lot of the Gedolei Poskim in many Chuvas. The question is as follows. We have a Posek in Dvarim that says clearly, Shmor nafshecha mo'od, a mitzvah to be careful and to make sure you do not get into any danger. It says in Dvarim over there, v'nishmartem.
You mean v'nishmartem? Right. The Posek Pshat is talking about Avodah Zarah, right? Kilo reason called Shmona, but Chazal darshan it as a zehirut from, right?
Correct. The Rambam in Ritzeach, Hilchos Ritzeach, says over there that in order that a person should not put himself in a makom that is dangerous where he might die. That's what the Rambam seems to say. And the following question is asked by a lot of Gedolei Poskim, is that we know that 2 of the 4 people that bench Gomel are Holchei Midbariyos and Holchei Ayam. People who go in the deserts, people who travel in the oceans. And we know when they come back from the deserts and the oceans, they're required to make a Birkas HaGoimel, to thanking Hashem for not getting into any danger. And the question arises that we understand the bracha we say afterwards, but why are we allowed to put ourselves in this situation to begin with? It's seemingly a contradiction to the halacha, min Torah of Raki Shamalacha, to allow people to go to the Midbariyos and the Yam l'chatchila. So the Shut Binyan Sian asked this question in Siman Kuf Lamed Zayin.
Right.
And there are various answers. I'm going to say 2 of the answers. The first answer the Binyan Sian gives, and this is a very halachic answer, I'd like to say. He says the following thing. He says that we know when it comes to Sakanas Nefashis, we are extremely machmir. The halacha is if we have someone that rocks fell on them on Shabbos, there's a din of mifbaching alav a gal, we're allowed to move the rocks to save his life. And the halacha is even if there's a minute or a very minority chance that a Jew's life is in danger in Shabbos when rocks fall on him, the halacha is we're allowed to move in and desecrate Shabbos to save his life. So the Binyan Sian says that halacha is not in contradiction to the halacha of Holchei Midbariyos and Holchei Yam. And he says the following thing. When someone has rocks on top of them and there's a mere chance that there's a sakanas nefashos, that is a suffix lifonenu. A person may be dying right now. The way he defines it is it's in front of us, a suffix lifonenu. There's a sakana vaday lifonenu, and that sakana, there's a mere chance that a person may die. It's lifonenu, it's in front of us, we have to be machmir. However, by Holchei Midbariyos and Holchei Ayam, where they may come in the future to a danger, even if there's a minority chance that there's a sakanas nefashos, we are not machmir. So he says the difference is there a sakana right in front of us, or could it lead to a sakana? A very halachic difference, very subtle difference.
But you mean halachic that it's a little bit difficult to understand this. I mean, you're saying it's like a bit of a technical difference.
That's
but
correct.
In terms of watching out for, again, what does this mean though? This is good, let's say, if you're speaking about questions of Chilul Shabbos. Okay, so for Chilul Shabbos, you need to have an issue of Sakanas Nefashos Lefonenu to be matter, let's say, Chilul Shabbos. But over here, we're speaking about a very general instruction. Right, but whether it's D'Oraisa or Rabbanan, there are different opinions, but it's a very general instruction. Some let it out from Micah, for example, that we have to, watch out for anything which is might lead to a dangerous circumstance. Why should there be any difference if it's, Pikuach Nefesh Lefanei? You have to be careful. You have to watch out for your well-being.
So the answer is that the way the Binyan Sian must learn is that these guidelines in the Dvarim that says you have to be careful even if it's a minute chance is only if it's something that's right in front of us. It's more, how would I say it? It's more defined in a situation of death right now, or sakana right now. Something that would lead to something, albeit a technical difference, and I do agree it's a technical difference, but in halacha, that's not what the Posek's referring to. In halacha, that's not what the Isser is referring to when we talk about the Isser of putting yourself in a sakana. That's what he says. And therefore he says, that's the binyan si, and that's a very extreme answer. According to that Hagdara, it would seem to be that people could put themselves in situations where it might come to a danger as long as there's no danger right now. And, you know, again, it could be that if it's an imminent danger, it's not just midbarius and yam where it's maybe only a minute chance of danger. If it's 100% chance of danger that might come, obviously he's not talking about that. But in cases where there's a mute chance of danger, he says the only time when there's a mute chance of danger that we are stringent is when the mute chance of danger is right in front of our eyes right now, not it would come to a mute chance of danger. That's the guidelines of the Binyan Sion in Siman Kuf Lamed Zayin.
Okay.
The Shem Aryeh asked the same exact question as the Binyan Sion. He gives a totally different answer in Siman Kuf Zayin. He says,
let me just say, if you would go to the Binyan Sion, then you would say you can do anything you want. You can go on extreme sports and go bungee jumping. It's all good. Meaning, this is not.
I would say. I agree to you. I would say going to a desert and a yam, which is dangerous. His question was, those are dangerous places. And his answer is, you're right. You're allowed to go to dangerous places as long as it's not the dangers in front of us. But again, he's talking about a danger that's still a minority danger, correct? We're not talking about someone going where there's more than a 50% likely that he would perish, right? We're talking about places where there's a minute chance. That would be parachuting, skydiving, skiing. I mean, we're all talking about in this broadcast, I'm assuming, where there's a minority chance of danger. If there's a majority chance
let's say, I guess the extreme
Russian roulette we're not talking about, right? No one in Jewish history matters Russian roulette, correct.
Right. In terms of our program, I guess the most extreme thing would be, mountain climbing, climbing Everest. These are things that are actually very dangerous. But still, it's not like, most people come back. But okay, so that's one approach. Let's say that's pretty extreme, right? That's an
extreme approach, correct.
Okay.
Now there is another somewhat extreme approach on the other side, the Shem Aryeh.
Right.
And the Shem Aryeh says the following answer to the question, how could Holchei Yam go lechatchila, how could Holchei Midbarius go lechatchila? And he says the following thing. He says that any type of action that's tzrichin liyishuv ha'olam, that's needed for normal civilization, and that is needed for parnasa, to exist, to commute, to live a normal life on this world, that we could earn a parnasa. I mean, he says parnasa once, but he means yishuv ha'olam, things that are tzrichim yishuv ha'olam. It's normally done. It's tzarich yishuv ha'olam. We have to get around, right? If you have a cousin or relative across the yam, if you can't go on the yam, you're never going to be able to get there. So something that's tzrichim yishuv ha'olam, and it's for parnasa. So then he says it is mutter. However, he points out, if a person would go on the yam or the midbar, not for parnasa, not for a need, but rather he says his lashon is lashut, to view things and to notice the beauty of the yam or the beauty of the midbar, that would be 100% prohibited. That's what the Shem Aryeh says. He says that's not the chazal of Holchei Midbarios and Yam. That's talking about you need to go there. But if you don't need to go there, it is 100% usher. So according to him, it would seem clearly to go to the Yam, to go on a hike, to go in the ocean on a cruise, that would be l'chayra 100% usher, if not for parnasa.
Again, depending on how you define the need. I mean, in our more modern day sensibilities, one could at least theoretically say that going on a cruise or on a pleasure trip or something like that would also be considered a need. It's a family need, it's a shlem bayis need, it's a psychological need, it's a derech ha'olam, So one wonders if today would have the same kind of strict definitions that the Shem Aryeh speaks about.
That's true, but the lashon, I'll just quote it to you. He says over here that someone who goes out to see Dvarim Chadoshin v'Chedoima, rak litzorich mizonos or lischora. So it would be a stretch, I believe, to say that mizonos and schora, to apply that to if you get a letter from your psychologist that you might be, committed to this asylum if you don't go on this cruise. That would be a little bit of a stretch, but I hear to interpretation that would be a little bit of a stretch. So it seems to be that the Shem Aryeh is being extremely machmir on this topic. Now, I want to point out one thing also. The Binyan Sian and the Shem Aryeh, when they talk about Holchei Midbaris and Holchei Yam, I'm not sure if their definition of Holchei Yam and Midbaris is the same definition we have. I mean, our cruises are pretty safe.
Right, meaning it would be difficult to apply what they say to a cruise, but you could apply it to mountain climbing, let's say.
I would say that's the safest bet. That's a safe bet, correct. I would say mountain climbing, correct.
Right. I remember that the term of... Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe skydiving or skiing as well.
Skiing? Right. I guess skiing does have a
lot of broken bones. A lot of broken bones in skiing. I could probably...
You know what, skiing... I wonder what's more dangerous, skiing or driving. Who gets more, which has more cases of, or in percentage terms, of grievous injuries, skiing or driving? I'm not sure.
I can tell you this, when you go for your life insurance policy, they ask you, do you ski? They don't ask you if you drive.
Well, perhaps it's a given that you're assumed to be a driver, but you're saying that skiing increases your chance of bodily injury, I guess. So that's interesting. Right. The other point is, of course, that driving, nobody is going to start making a cheshbon. Do I now, can I walk to shul, or do I need a car? Is it a parnasa? Is it not a parnasa? People will drive anyway, and driving is certainly less safe than flying an airplane, or than sailing a boat. I mean, driving, I imagine more people are injured or killed, Rahman al-Islam, driving than they are sailing or flying in an airplane, certainly. So, if we're going to be matter driving, even without, a very, serious purpose, such as parnasa or something else that's required, then it would be difficult to answer, going on a cruise or flying in an airplane.
Yeah. I would now like to introduce the tshuvas of Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he has numerous tshuvas. And I saw the Binyan Sian and the Shem Aryeh are two extremes. I think the Igros Moshe gives us a little bit of guidance, maybe practically, especially in America. We know Rav Moshe is the Posek Achroin.
Right.
Rav Moshe has a fascinating tshuva in which he implies in which he uses a very well-known concept, and I want to introduce it as following. He discusses smoking, and this broadcast is not going to talk about smoking in the year 2019. I think all poskim agree this is talking about smoking back in the 70s, where it wasn't as dangerous as it is now. But let's assume we're back in the 70s, and Rav Moshe's tshuva, someone asked him, are you allowed to smoke? And Rav Moshe said in his tshuva that there's a halachic concept called Shomer Psoim Hashem. And he says the following thing. He says that even though smoking, and back then in the 70s, I guess, there was a danger, we know a lot more now. Again, we're not talking about nowadays. He says that there's a Gemara in Shabbos in Kuf Chav Tes, a fascinating Gemara. And the Gemara says different times for bloodletting. And the Gemara says there's two times where bloodletting's dangerous. It's dangerous to do it on a Tuesday, and it's dangerous to do it on an Erev Shabbos, because those times the zodiac signs are very against bloodletting, and it's dangerous. We're not going to go into that also. But it says that even though the halacha is not to bloodlet on Tuesday, Shmuel says, but when we do it Erev Shabbos, even though it's equally as dangerous as Tuesday, why, says the Gemara? Because Doshu Bei Rabim, says the Gemara. Since people do it anyway, we do it. We bloodlet Erev Shabbos, and it's just as dangerous as Tuesday. We use the Posek in Tehillim, Shoim Psoim Hashem, Hashem will protect us. So therefore, says Rav Moshe, we see that even though something is dangerous, and Luchatchila it shouldn't be done, but if people do it, them doing it permits al pi halacha for at least to go ahead and continue to do it, which is fascinating because you would say, don't stop doing it. We're making a mistake. We're bloodletting on Friday. Erev Shabbat is dangerous. But no, says the Gemara, Doshu Bei Rabim, everyone does it. Shoim Psoim Hashem, and therefore halachically it's mutter. And therefore he says smoking in a halachic level is fine in the 70s. That's what Moshe says.
Okay. So, and how would you extrapolate that to questions of, going on trips and going on, hikes and extreme sports or whatever it is? That would all be, all of this would be Dasha Rabim, you would say, if it's something which is not too extreme. How would you define that?
I mean, I want to say, and I don't think this is far-fetched, smoking in the 70s and the 60s is just as equivalent to skiing or skydiving or mountain climbing. It's not, I think it's something that a lot of people do. There's for sure Rabim. It's a big business. It's not for Yechidim. It's not Mount Everest. Mount Everest, you have to be very special to do Mount Everest, but I think it's a normal vacation activity. And although it could be dangerous, could be it's dangerous. Could be maybe al pi halacha and according to percentage. It could be that the binyan the shem aryeh is correct and you shouldn't be doing it. But if everyone does it, shomer psoim Hashem, and therefore halachically we cannot stop someone from doing it. And I think that would be applied to smoking. 70 smoking and mountain climbing nowadays, I think it's both equal. Even if you want to be machmir and say it's dangerous, it's still you have a heter of doshu be'rabim.
I mean, Dasha Rabim means specifically Yidden, or it means anybody. Because let's say it could be that yeshivas will be more cautious. The question is, how do you define Dasha Rabim? It's smoking. Let's say in the 70s, it was like eating. Everyone smokes. It's so even though some will say, hey, what about this and this research? But that's what everyone does. Again, today, chas v'shalom, this is definitely not the situation anymore. But the question would be, not everyone goes skydiving. Many people don't.
Well, the question is, they don't go skydiving because of danger or because of fear. Another thing I want to point out, a lot of these activities have people restrain themselves not because of the danger, but maybe it's because of the, people don't go on amusement park rides, right? They're scared. I won't go on one. But I promise you the reason I'm not going on is not because of the danger, but rather the fear. And so I don't know if people refrain from activities because of fear, if that necessarily makes it not Dashu Be'rabim.
Right, meaning you're saying that if people would be prepared, if not for their fear or because they don't like it, right.
So, it's like a roller coaster ride. Everyone, I think no one would ask for a roller coaster ride, to my knowledge. I think it's much safer to be in a roller coaster than be in a car. Maybe walk across the street. It's probably more dangerous than being in a roller coaster. But people don't go to roller coasters. But that's just a thrill. That's a mental thrill. So I think we have to distinguish between a mental thrill and actual danger as well. A lot of these sports that we talk about is just a mental danger. It's a mental fear, but not real danger. Now, Reb Moshe does have a tshuva that I think is very applicable to halacha l'maisa in Or Chaim in Nun Tes. Moshe says a tshuva over there. He says, and this is Lashon Reb Moshe. He says when a person goes l'derech, a person going l'derech and is going in a place where he thinks there might be a sakana. And he still wants to go. He's going to go on vacation. So Moshe is talking about a person who decided to go despite danger, l'tayel, for enjoyment. He says it's mutter mitzad achshash sakana mishum chash rochuk tuva. Since it's achshash rochuk, it's mutter. So Moshe cannot hold at all like the Shem Aryeh, that's for sure. Right? So that Shem Aryeh we brought that's really extreme and says it's usher, Moshe can't hold like that because he's saying that even a chash rochuk, it's mutter to go, l'tayel. So he certainly is being matir to a certain extent going on vacation, even though it's a danger.
Mm-hmm. There's a Gemara with Nachamish Gamzu. I think that, if I remember correctly, Rav Moshe mentions Parnasa there. But here he's saying even the tail, which is a tzorach.
That's correct.
Right, that's a sufficient tzorach.
I mean, we know that with tail, we know that for Parnasa there's a special Posek. There's the Elov who noise es nafshoy. that, for parnasa we're allowed to be misakin ourselves. Nowadays a little effort, people don't want to go to work, but halachically it's supposed to be, even if it's maybe taking
the Gemara speaks about people who have to climb trees or have to climb up into dangerous.
So that we're not talking about also. Now, when I guess deep sea fishermen, I think the dangerous parnasa in America right now is a deep sea fisherman, to my knowledge. I'm not. I think it would be more to be a deep sea fisherman based upon the Elavu says Nafsha, that Gemara about climbing trees. But again, this is all not talking about parnasa. Now, aside of these three opinions, there's also, when we have to analyze something, what's even called a danger to begin with? What percentage? We associate everything in our lives with percentages. What number percentage is there? And I saw, interestingly, brought down a dissenting opinion between Rishonim Zalman Auerbach and Rabbi Yashiv. Rishonim Zalman brings a Mogen Avram in Siman Shin Lam. It talks about women giving birth. Do Mechal Shabbos for women giving birth. And Shlomo Zalman says over there that the Mogen Avram says that if it's a sakana that's 1 in 1,000, it's not a real sakana and it's garnished. If it's 1 in 1,000, the Mogen Avram says you don't have to mechal Shabbos, it's not a real sakana, right? It's 1 in 1,000. And so Shlomo Zalman says that if it's something's less than 1 in 1,000, that's not even a sakana. It's not even, we don't have to worry about it in any halachic level at all. And I would venture to say that skydiving or skiing, and certainly driving on the highway, for sure, the fatalities or injuries are less than 1 in 1,000. I'm positive of that. And
again, that's interesting, but I'm not sure if that would fit with the issue that you brought up before with Abba Tzrichim Lehodos, because there, again, today we say we bench Gomel today on on going on flights, and there's no 1 in 1,000. It's 1 in 1,000,000. And nonetheless, we bench Gomel because it's still somehow, it doesn't surprise us when we hear about, Chas v'Shalom tragedies, that they happen, and it's still something, this sounds a little bit like the question of what's considered a miyat hamatzoi in terms of looking for bugs. It's not a direct analogy, but still, skydiving is...
To interrupt the rabbi, I saw B'Shem Rabbi Yashiv, and I didn't hear from Rabbi Yashiv, but it's brought down in Chashukei. Shlomo Sefer brings down B'Shem Rabbi Yashiv that he tells Sue and he compares Miyut HaMatzoi to dangerous situations.
Oh, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And he brings the famous Mishkanis Yaakov that says less than 10%.
Which is interesting. Again, it's still working within percentages. He would say the same thing here, 10%.
No, so he says, this is the way it's quoted, Rabbi Yashiv, and this is Rabbi Yitzchok Zilberstein quoting his Shver, saying that anything that is less than 5% is not considered dangerous. That means 1 in 20. It's not even considered a sakana.
Lenient what? Lenient what does he say that?
The Indian going in highways that are dangerous, going through Arab villages, going through dangerous situations. If it's less than 5%, you don't have, which is it's 1 in 20, right?
I didn't get this. If 1 in 20 people driving through an Arab village is shot dead, Rahman al-Islam, then it's okay, then you can do it.
Well, again, could do it and should do it. We'll get to that in a moment.
It's mutter. Halacha, it's mutter.
That's what, in the Sefer Chashukei Shlomo B'Shem, Rabbi Yashiv, he says less than 5%. So that's
unbelievable. I mean, Chazal answered, Mayim Geluyim. Chazal were worried about snakes going in and putting their poison in, and we're not going to worry about driving through Shechem. I mean, this is very far-reaching. This is.
Well, we know the famous Vilna Gaon about the water and the snakes is that the Chazal had other reasons behind their gezerah.
Maybe that's a machlokes. Maybe again, we know the nigla of it. The nigla of it was because of a danger, like Melech Stoimis and like.
But I want to point out one last thing. I think it's very important in the whole shmooze we're talking about. The Igros Moshe smoking tshuva that he says halachically, like in the 60s and 70s, it's mutter. He ends his tshuva that says even though in halacha it's mutter, and we have shoyim psoyim Hashem. Certainly, if you would call Rav Moshe on the phone and say, "Should I do it?" he would say no, because it is a sakana. So that's
this is in the Yeridam Test. He says that.
He says
where he speaks about the smoking. That's where he speaks about the smoking. He says it's Tasha B'Ravim and it's Shem of Sam Hashem, but he says still he recommends not to do it.
He says not to do it. He says even though it's mutter and it's leka isura. There's no isur. He says there's no isur even to give someone to pass someone a lighter. He says I'll lay the Ramosha avo vaday min aroi l'kol ish ubefrat lebnei Torah shelo la'ashin mi'acher shehu chash sakanta ve'ein bezeh shum toyelis begam hano. So I want to point out something very important.
Wow.
A lot of things. It's an oversaid statement. The fifth chelik of Shulchan Aruch. The fact that Halacha doesn't address it, it doesn't mean it's something that a ben Torah and we shouldn't do. If it's mutter, it's mutter. It's mutter to do many things that the Torah says that b'yem kedoshim and we should not do. Right? You have to be holier than even what some of the halachas are. So Ramosha says that it's for sure not a fitting thing to do at all. Al pi musar, al pi hashkafa, al pi seichel. So halacha only addresses a certain amount. And I guess all the headline shmuzim get to this at some point. I'm assuming that even though halacha addresses our whole lives and everything, and it could be mutar al pi halacha, it's still not the proper thing to be moderate for everyone and to say it. So Ramosha took it as business to say at the end of the tshuva. By the way, this tshuva is 1981, and Chelik Beis Seminayin Vav. 81 is already smoking is pretty dangerous in 81. I was alive back then, but anyway, nonetheless, he says don't do it. He says minaroi not to do it. So I mean, to say halachically the tshuvas we mentioned, the Shemari, the Binyan Sion, and the other Ramosha, but you still have to always say, is it minaroi to do? Is it fitting to go to Mount Everest? Let's assume it's less than 1 of 1,000 people die in Mount Everest. I mean, is that something that we should be doing? Is that something that makes sense? Is that seichel? That's what Ramosha would ask, which is interesting because how does seichel override the Torah? I mean, you can't be fruman in the Torah. The Torah says mutter to smoke, mutter to smoke. What does it mean you shouldn't do it? But that's another shmuz. But that's what Ramosha says in his tshuva.
Mm-hmm. So let me bring this home to some of the real questions or real life scenarios that where unfortunately we've had a number of tragedies, and every Beinas Manim we have unfortunately a number of tragedies. We had an Avrich here in Eretz Yisrael that he went swimming in a sea that wasn't marked, or it was in the night and there was no lifeguard and so on. There was a tragedy in New York, of course, with the Avrech or a Ram, an important Talmid Chacham that tried to save one of his children and was tragically drowned. Is it mutter to go to a sea without a lifeguard? Is it mutter to swim? Can a person say, that's my choice, I have discretion, that's my shikol hadas? Or is it something which is defined as being dangerous? It's against the accepted, it's against the rules. Again, it's not illegal, you're not breaking the law, but this is against the general understanding, the general rules of precautions that a person is supposed to take. Or can he say, I'm a good swimmer, I rely on myself, I know what I'm doing, I'll be fine. Is there a halachic guideline here?
I mean, I would say, according to the Rav Shlomo Zalman, it brings the Mogen of Rome, there's something that's less than 1 in 1,000 that is a sakana, that it's mutter. I would venture to say, and I'm pretty sure saying this, that you leave 1,000 people don't have a life vest to go on a boat. Out of the 1,000, they're all coming back fine. I think it's less than 1 in 1,000 that something happens to. So I think we can't answer it. I mean, it's for sure less than 1 in 1,000. If we're not Mechal Shabbos for a woman that has Keve Leda because it's less than 1 in a, because it's less than, not more than 1 in 1,000. No,
the halacha we're Mechal Shabbos for a woman who's giving birth.
Beginning birth, so Keve Leda. The moment I was talking about Keve Leda.
Right, whatever, right.
Whatever that is.
Again, today, a woman giving birth is also less than 1 in 1,000. You don't have death at birth. Rachmana litzlan is today less than 1 in 1,000, and still it's still Mechal Shabbos for it because it's.
That's nifsak the halacha that that again back in the day that's nifsak the halacha that it's
right. Even though today it's right. The question though is does it make sense that the halacha should be more lenient, as it were, than the precautions, than the rules of the beach, right? The rules, it says there's a big notice. Don't go to the sea without a lifeguard, right? The big notice, right? Danger. And we'll say, al pi halacha, it's okay, or should we say that, if this is the accepted level of precautions that a person is supposed to be taking, then going beyond that accepted level is something which is forbidden. It's something which is also, you have to, you can't take the law into your own hands, as it were. It's the 1 in 1,000. For example, for bugs, mir tamatzui. So Rabbi Falk from Gateshead says a different hagdara. He says the hagdara is, would you be surprised to find a bug? If you're not surprised to find a bug, then that's called a mir tamatzui. If you find a bug and say, wow, what's a bug doing in an apple? Okay, that's a mir tamatzui. So, tragically, we're not so surprised when we hear about these cases of people, going swimming at night and chalila drowning, because it's, maybe this is a mir tamatzui, as it were.
I hear what you're saying. I think the same guidelines would be exactly the Moshe smoking tshuva, that no Rav, and I think no Moreh Rav would ever say it's fine. I think that's a wrong Hayra. I think for sure it's not proper to do. For sure it's the wrong thing. But in the Halacha guidelines, that Halacha uses certain categories, and all laws are like that. I think in the Halacha categories, if it's less than 1 in 1,000 danger, it's difficult to say. It's also just like Rav Moshe said, smoking, in that tshuva there was cancer around back then. There was a lot of cancer. He talks about it. Now, the cancer in the 80s in cigarettes is less dangerous than going out without a life jacket? Hard to say.
Right, but it's more, interesting, but it could be it's more Doshabi Rabbim. Even though you're right, on the cigarette packs in the 80s, it already said, danger of death or something, some scary sentence. I think those were around in the 80s already, so, meaning also there you had warnings, so it's not like, maybe it's a good comparison. What do you think about the question of takanos? Meaning Chazal were metaken all kinds of takanos when they've understood that something would be dangerous or something would be a danger to a person's health. For example, Chazal said you shouldn't drink directly from something that would be, could be dangerous in terms of infections or other isurim, mayim guloyim and so on, not mixing meat and fish and other things that were deemed dangerous in Chazal's time. I just saw yesterday that in one of the Chasidiyos in Rebbaran of the Satmar Rebbe cancelled all trips that involved water because he writes that we see that there are tragedies. We see that Chas v'Shalom people lose their lives, and when boys and girls go on such trips, the parents are worried and concerned. He says, we're just cancelling everything. We're making, as it were, like a blanket isser. Do you think there's room for Rabbanim and for Mostos for Rabbanim to make such blanket issers, to make blanket issurim? Going to again, this is extreme. Going to any kind of water activity is also, but we could think of a more moderate level of making such takanas. Do you think that would be something that that the Moretas should be considering to make guidelines, halachic guidelines, or takanas concerning safety in different activities and different kind of outings?
So the answer would be that takanas are only worth the amount that people will listen to them, and it's Satmar has the ability and the koach to make a takana, and they listen to him. But for the Moetzes Gadol to make it, first of all, before if it's worthy or not, first, is it something that's practical? Then we can see if it's a worthy thing to do. So practically to make such a takana in the regular Litvish Yeshiva Shalom, no swimming, no boats, everyone, to my knowledge, knowing people and being part of the normal Yeshivish world, I don't see anyone keeping that to the sea. We're hard enough, it's hard enough, we're dealing with filtering our smartphones, and it's difficult enough. Once we get that problem, we can start dealing with these problems. But I think we're way behind the ball in a lot of other takanas that we're trying to do. I mean, I want to just point out something really interesting to finish off with. we had a shaila here in Cleveland a way back. It's important to note in this year, we had a shaila, there was a mixed gym that men and women were going to mixed gyms with goyim and whatnot. It's halachas and mutter, whatever. So people were saying that it's mutter because, Rabbanan was saying it's mutter because if you have a heart condition, you need for health reasons, you're allowed to go to the gym. And it could be mixed, but you're allowed to go. I'm not getting involved in that right now. So I asked Rabbi Morgenstern in Eretz Yisrael and in Shuafat, and he said, you know what, maybe it's a sakana if you don't exercise, but, going to a pace of pretzis, your nefesh having a sakana. Don't forget, there's spiritual sakanas also. And spiritual sakanas are way more important than physical sakanas. That's the Kabbalah we have from Rabbi Seinu. And
so this is your comparison between the smartphone and going on a hike. Well,
I think in our spiritual takanas, a lot of the takanas are failing. So now to make physical takanas, I think it's too much for the tzibur. I think it's just a waste of our time. That's my opinion.
Okay, but even if you don't make takanas, at the very least, to publish guidelines. I'm saying, it doesn't have to be in terms of Isser v'Heter, but at the very least, to put out concrete guidelines in terms of safety of the community. Meaning, again, I guess it's a kind of similar question to what we spoke about before. Should we leave it to the discretion of each and every individual, or should we, put out proper guidelines? I mean, in Eretz Yisrael, sometimes Rabbanim say, for example, vaccinations. All right, so Rabbanim say everyone needs to get vaccinated. Why? Because we don't want to trust people. Some people say, I do want to vax, I don't want to vax. I know I don't want to get into the vaccination issue because, number one, it's been done before, and number two, it's a controversy in and of itself. But, the Rabbanim went out and said, there's a chiyuv, everyone has to get a vaccination. We won't allow kids in school who were not vaccinated and so on. And that's obviously a health issue. It's slightly different because you can affect somebody else. If you're not vaccinated, you can affect other people, whereas over here it's for your own safety. But perhaps there's room for similar kind of, guidelines or instructions concerning personal safety in certainly in times of Bin Izmanim and so on.
Yeah, I just feel that in my experience, it's going to be not listened to, number one. And number two, I have never seen practically in America any of the Gedolim make takanas for safety issues that has been kept for many, many years. If you give me one example, I could tell it to. Danger is not a new thing. Maybe all these phenomenons that are happening lately is new, but regular danger, there's always a danger not wearing a seatbelt. There's always a danger of leaving a baby in a car. There's tons of dangers. I have never seen any takanas ever come out from any gedolim from the last generation and the previous generation, the yeshiva world, specifically related to danger. So to start making takanas, I think that's chodesh osim in the Torah.
Not a stretch of chodesh osim in the Torah, but it's been stretched before, so we can add another one. Okay. Rabbi Rappaport, a great Yeshua, thank you very much for being with us. Your experience and your wisdom is much appreciated, and look forward to having you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kol Tov, Piva.
Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle. Parsha says, "Uba'arein hisanef Hashem oid." Hashem got very, very mad. Moshe relates about Aaron. So Rashi says he wanted to kill him and his whole family. So Rashi says, "V'spal bad Aaron, I daven faren, v'hoyelt v'hayilot tfilasi, my tefillah helped, v'chaper machza, u'meisu shnayim and asharu shnayim." So Dasan v'avirim died, 2 died, and 2 didn't die. So my tefillah helped for 2. So the 2 died was seemingly, Rashi implies, because Uba'arein his anef Hashem oid, Hashmidei. The question is, we know that there's a klal, ein adam meis, elo bechetei, a person dies, ish bechetei yumas. Everybody dies for their own averos. For example, the Magen Avram in Reish Chaf Hey, Sivkat and Hey, brings the Levush, when you say Baruch Shepatranim Yein Shishal Zeh, till the Bar Mitzvah, the boy could die because of his parents. After the Bar Mitzvah, he's a gadol, ish bechetei yumas. So how could Rashi Bayah say that Nadav and Avihu died of because of Aaron his son of Hashem, because Rabban Shalom got mad at Aaron, when we know that Ishbecheta Yumas and after Bar Mitzvah a person lives on their own merit or dies on their own merit, right? This klal and it's brought Halacha, I say in the Magen Avram, is neged the way Rashi is learning in our Posek that Nadav Avihu died because of Aaron Asanaf Hashem Ma'id. That is our riddle of the week.
Hi, my name is Sean Parnas. Regarding your question of the week this week about how the Posek is mashma, Rashi is mashma that the reason why Nadav Avihu died is because of Aaron's chet, and yet we have a rule, Ishbechet, Yumasu. I think the answer is very simple, because we have a klal that, Keilamuna vein Avel, that the Mershlam doesn't punish someone unless anyone who's affected by the punishment deserves that punishment. So, yes, while it's true that Nadav and Avihu died because of their own Aveira, if Aaron didn't deserve it, then they never would have died to cause Aaron the pain. And this also is going to answer that Rashi in Shmini brings down that as a machlekes Tana and other reasons why Nadav and Avihu died. So you could have asked the same question. How could it be a machlekes when Rashi over here, Rashi says to himself, because Rashi over here, really catches the pasuk that it was because of Aaron's Avera. The same teretz is true, that of course Nadav and Avihu's own Avera caused them to die, but because Aaron did what he did, that's why they were able to die and cause him that tzar.